I'm going to pretend I'm you, Chris, and I'm going to say exactly what you just said. That was the longest on-ramp ever. Like, I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, oh, geez, we're going to squeeze in a podcast, but I don't know how long it's going to be because both of us have a life outside of this. But thanks for the on-ramp. I needed it, and I think, well, you spent a little bit of time there at the tail end, so it sounds like we both had a little bit to process, and we're done processing.
Yeah, no more thinking.
Okay. So now that you've said no more thinking, let me throw down a really easy one that I wanted to talk about today. But before I say that, literally a minute ago, there was something else I wanted to bring up, and now it's gone. So I hope it comes back. But this week, there was at the beginning of the week, there was like an ice storm here in Ontario. And on Monday, schools were closed in my school board. So I had a snow day / ice storm day, I guess you could call it. And the minute it happened, I was like, got to talk about this on the podcast, because if we're talking decoded, right? We're talking about education, the things that happen, our lives as parents connected with our work as educators. I have to tell you my thinking behind snow days, okay? Because snow days are like, they're the gold nugget that you rarely get. I mean, in some places this past winter, it sounded like kids weren't going to school ever because of so many snow days in their area. But in my school board, it happens once or twice every few years. Like, it really is not, you can't say it happens every year, because I don't think it does. I don't have the stats in front of me. But a snow day is always just like, for me, it's a euphoric moment, because you're like, I don't have to go to work today. And I'm a teacher, right? So obviously it's like, I don't have to go to work. My school's closed. And then you tell the kids, and they look at you with this perplexed look, like, what do you mean I don't have to go to school today? And then you drop the little bomb on them and you say, the schools are closed because of the weather. So mommy and daddy aren't going to work and you're staying home. Then there's this like euphoric thing that takes over. But so for me and my partner and my kids, it's awesome, because you don't have to go to work. You get to stay home with your family. And when it happens on a Friday or a Monday, it's even cooler, because you've got an extended weekend. So last week, Friday was a PD day. So the teachers weren't teaching and the students weren't in the classrooms. And then Saturday and Sunday, we were getting all this rain turning into ice. And Monday morning, I find out there's no school. So my kids hadn't been to school in 4 days, which was wild for them. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, because I don't know how often people get to hear teachers talk about a snow day or an ice storm day, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it a snow day from here on in, just to make it simple. Here's the part I want to dig into. Here's the decoded part. Here's the part where I kind of tell the world, well, you're the only other listener, so you're going to hear about this. A snow day for me is, I'm a bit cursed when it comes to snow days, and I'll tell you why. I tend to wake up at around 5:30 in the morning. Okay, I wake up at 5:30. I kind of get my wits of me, and they come together, and then I jump in the shower, get out, get dressed, and then I'm good to go. But in my school board, the decision to close the schools isn't made until around 6 a.m. But I'm not going to wait around till 6 a.m. to see whether I should shower and get dressed or not. Like, that's not typically what I do. So here's the curse. Get out of the shower, get dressed, check my email, check 570 News Twitter feed. This year it was at 6:01. It was put out that schools are closed. I'm fully dressed. I'm wide awake. It's 6:01. I'm not going back to bed. Tell my wife, kind of gently wake her up and say, there's no school. Schools are closed. She's does her little yippee, and then she's out again. And then I don't go near the kids. I just let them wake up on their own. The curse is this. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited. I'm so happy that I don't have to go to work. that I can't go back to sleep. Right. And so then at around 11 a.m., when everybody's awake and everybody's well rested, I want to take a nap, but I can't because everybody's wide awake and ready to rock and roll. So that's the curse of the snow day for me, is that I'm so pumped and excited. The adrenaline just kicks in. I'm not going back to sleep, even if I wanted to. And then when I do want to go to sleep, everybody's wide awake and it's time to just live your life. So the curse of the snow day. But it was nice to have. And it's always funny to listen to the banter on social media, like with my friends, not with strangers I don't know, but with my friends who work in my board and who work in the public board down the street. It's always fun to hear like the theories, like I won't name any names, but one person's like, well, they're going to call it a snow day because we haven't had one this year. And, it's April. So it's not like we're going to have many more opportunities. This is like a fluke. And then other people are like, this is nothing. It's going to be nothing. You're going to wake up in the morning. You're going to be disappointed. The roads are going to be clear. Like, it's just fun to listen to it all. And then they'll say, Rolland, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to wake up at 5:30. And if it's a snow day, then the curse will hit me. And if it's not a snow day, then I'm going into work and I'm going to do what I do every day. I mean, sure, I'd like to stay home, but I'm not banking on it. I'm not going to wake up disappointed. I'm just going to wake up and do my thing, and whatever happens, happens. So I just wanted, now the snow day talk is part of the DeCodEd experiment. 2 teachers going through a school year, trying to podcast every week about their experiences. So week 30, episode 30, I'm able to say I participated in a snow day, and we got to talk about it on the podcast.
What I loved is, so you're sort of touching base on social media, reaching out to individuals. I loved your text to me because it was, dude, like let's podcast today. Let's do the snow day podcast. And I text back, I'm like, I'm at work. It's like, it's inclement weather, so the schools aren't closed. I think there hasn't been a single time in my school board where the schools were closed from the beginning. There's been, I think, a couple times. How long have I been teaching now? I've been teaching since 2005. So there's been a couple times where they've said, okay, we're closing them in the afternoon. Ironically, it's never happened on an actual instructional day. It's only happened on professional development days, where they've said, okay, sorry, we're stopping PD today. Everyone's going home at noon. It's getting worse. Where they've said, the school is officially closed. All permits are done, buses, everything is canceled, right? So it was unfortunate because that was perfect bait. I would have loved to. I forget actually if we had any students show up on that day, but I was at work. I was in my classroom. I was doing some prep. But I was sad. I was like, I would have totally loved to been able to sort of speak to the snow day at that point. The other thing that you make me think of in this is, because of the small space that I'm in, and so snow day not being, like I said, snow day for me typically means I still go in. The school is very close to my house. The going in and sort of being in that space, and I think back to being in a larger school where there were more individuals around. It's funny, your talk about connecting with individuals in social media and just connecting that way made me think and kind of remember how much I really enjoyed just connecting with staff that I wouldn't normally get to connect with. So walking around the school, when you have a sort of staff of 70 or 80 people, connecting on that front, just sort of some of those human connections, the people that just because of the way staff meetings work and schedules work, that I just never really got a chance to get to know. So I would sort of go in on these snow days, sort of thinking, yeah, I might get some prep done. I'll do some planning, maybe I'll do some writing. And inevitably I'd get swept up in some pretty cool conversations, because you don't really know how the day is going to go. In some ways, sometimes people's guards are down. Like you're not wearing your teachable anymore, and you're not necessarily connected with departments anymore. And I can remember being so fascinated about seeing seeing people together that I never knew were connected. I was like, really? I didn't know like those 3 people from the tech department always hung out with those 2 people in the math department. You'd start to see the connections with other teachers as well. And it kind of boosted a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it started to feel the family or the community. Like what work does to kind of keep you focused on work, the busyness that can keep you blind to kind of what's going on other than what's in front of you. So snow days in some ways, or inclement weather days in our board, was kind of an opportunity to see teachers a little bit more in their natural state, a little bit dressed down, a little bit more relaxed, maybe anxious because they don't know how they're going to get home or whatever, but kind of, I don't know, I had a bit of a cottage feel. The more I think about it, it's a little bit of a cottage feel. You feel people kind of like cottage or camping, that moment in the morning where people are just kind of peeking out of their tents and saying, okay, what are we going to do today? Where's the day? You know, someone's already started the campfire. Someone's got some coffee going. Like it had that kind of roundness to it. Like you felt like you could go sit and just have a snack or drop in on people. And when I think about it in my own life, like there's not a lot of people, and I don't know if this is me. I don't know if this is just where we are kind of in our communities, but I don't have a life where a lot of people kind of drop in unannounced. And it's almost like that's such a great social tool to drop in unannounced, because I guess unless you really don't like the person dropping in unannounced, but I just mean that there's the relationship there, that opportunity to just feel like if we are friends, I can go seek you out. I think we're entirely used to it on social media. Heck, you'll get a random message from someone that seems to think that they're your friend and they'll connect and start talking. Facebook. I mean, that's just the reality. But that sort of opportunity to do it person to person, that was something that I always felt was a part of snow days. Like you could just strike up that conversation randomly with that person that you thought you had no connection with whatsoever. I guess that's my fond memory of snow days. But I haven't had that moment like you said, that check the feed, go back to bed. It hasn't happened. But I totally appreciate what you're saying, because I'm an early riser too. And typically there's a range of early rising that's good for me. Then there's an extension on that of possibility. Like for example, for whatever reason today, I woke up at 4 a.m. Just happened. Like there's no rhyme or reason. Now, when that happens, I tend not to lay there and try and relax myself into sleep. I just think to myself, maybe I'll try to get to bed earlier to the next night. I kind of just take it as a loss and I move on. So there's my ramble on snow days.
Okay, so we've hit snow days. When I was younger in my career and a little bit more social, we'd have a snow day and the telephone would ring. Right now, nobody's calling anybody now. Everybody's texting each other and stuff, but the phone would ring and I'm like, yeah, so-and-so just called me. Got to hang up and call the next person. That's what it was like. Those days are over. But it was nice to have the day. So that brought us to, I think, 4 weeks in a row of having 4-day work weeks at school in terms of teaching the students. So it's been a bit of a wild April, I guess. Geez, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. It just keeps escaping me. I've got this nice pen here. I should really use it and write down some of the things that pop up. But I don't know why I'm not doing that. I had the... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the other thing that I love, and it's not specifically about the snow day. It's more about the lead up to snow days. I love the and I want to say a really big word, but I never get it with prognostication. Is that right? Was that good? Prognostication, that idea, like, and the kids are sort of sometimes they're existing in some kind of ninja level of an almanac where they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a snow day on Friday. And I have to say, this year in particular, the kids have been pretty on point. Imagine that kind of knowledge. Imagine being the kid. Here's the other thing. Imagine being the kid, I guess, or the teacher that is so confident that it is going to be a snow day. And let's put it a snow day in your context, where the possibility of the school being closed. Imagine being that confident that you don't even set your alarm. You don't bother setting anything up. You just say, I know. I have deeper knowledge. I am in possession of the deep knowledge of the nature of things that I'm not packing. I'm not the bag of work gone. The alarms off. The staying up till midnight watching Netflix and then still watching another hour of Netflix. Done. Right? I'm eating before bed because I'm just like, tomorrow is a snow day. And some of the kids this year they were in that zone. I just thought to myself, wow, that's so remarkable. That's like the best edu superpower ever, to actually know that. And yeah, some kids they're batting like almost 800. Ridiculous calling it. So that was my observation. The kids this year, and fewer teachers sort of calling it out. Just the kids. Yeah. Yeah, you really shouldn't have that assignment on that day because it's going to be a snow day. Like, I'm starting to suspect like literacy skills, like they're starting to grab the Farmer's Almanac, going back to basics. that was my.
Wouldn't that be cool though, in a way, to go back to basics? Right? I don't know. Sounds interesting. Okay, I remembered the two things and I wrote them down.
Woohoo!
Number one, it would have been epic if we could have done our weekly podcast on the snow day. So here I am, selfish. The world revolves around me. I finally, get downstairs, start making some food, and I text you thinking, well, if I've got a snow day, everybody's got to have a snow day because you're not that far away from me. And yeah, I texted you. I'm like, dude, because I figured number one, you'd be up. Yeah. Number two, your kids would probably be coloring or something in a corner. Yep. And I just assumed that your partner would probably still be sleeping. I don't know why. That's my reality. So I just assume it's everybody else's. But I'm like, let's do this. Like, everything here is under control. I don't have to be anywhere. And then when you texted me back and you said that you were at work, I was devastated. I felt like, number one, I felt like, I just wrecked his day because I'm sitting at home and like, let's do a podcast and you're at school working with your kids, right? The second thing, I was like, what do you mean not everybody has a snow day? So those two things hit me. Then I wanted to say, this week, I actually thought that I had not published our last two episodes. And here's the beauty of this. All I had to do was go online, go to the blog and see what's been posted, but I didn't. So every night this week, I would come into this room that I'm podcasting from. I turn on the computer. I'm like, I just need 30 minutes and I can push this out, push that out. And every night something would happen. So I'd turn on the computer and I'd go to sit down and just work for a solid 30, and someone would call my name, or I'm like, oh, I better go check this before I start. And then it never got done. So this morning, when I came in here to get ready for the podcast, I'm like, geez, now I'm going to be 3 episodes behind. I can't even get 2 published. How am I going to get 3? And then when I was getting you the link for our hangout, I looked and I'm like, oh, we're all caught up. Like, why have I thought that I've been behind? And why didn't I just check to see if I was behind? So you can imagine the relief I experienced knowing now, like, we're just working on this one. Hopefully I can get this one up before the next week. Like, I've been living in some kind of bubble. That's what I think. I've been living in some kind of bubble. And it's one of those bubbles where I'm looking forward to the weekends. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be living for the weekend, but it sure feels like that's what's been happening lately. So sorry about the texting, because you're probably at school thinking, I wish I was at home. Maybe not. I don't know. The second thing is I'm glad that I'm caught up because it was really starting to nag me. And the weekend's here, and I'm kind of excited about that. So we'll see how long that excitement lasts.
Flat out, dude, text me anytime. It don't matter. I turn off my device if I don't want to be found. It always that moment like that always reminds me of my dad when he got his first cell phone. Now, this is already well into me and my use of a cell phone, but I loved watching his process of figuring out how to make that damn device work with his life. I can't tell you how many times, and this was kind of before, he never had text. Despite the fact you could force a text to, do you remember back in the day when you could force the text to a phone? And then the charges, with our particular, this was sort of like, sometimes he didn't have it turned off. So a text would actually arrive on his thing and it would charge him like $1 for it or something like that. So we're going back like 10 years, right? Anyways, so many times I would think, I just want to reach out to Pop. I'm going to give him a shout. And the phone would ring and ring and ring. And he didn't have voicemail. So it would just keep on ringing and ringing and ringing. And what I'm not really aware of initially is the spiral of anxiety that I'm sending him into. Because he spoke of it afterwards. He goes, I buy this thing and then I realize I'm not even sure how to answer it. And it's alive, but I don't know how to deal with it. It's like getting a pet that you have no clue how to feed it. And it's there just or a baby. I'm starting to realize, you go into something so naively. Yeah, I'll totally make this work. And then, the 10 minutes later, your phone's still ringing because you haven't picked it up. So when he finally kind of figured it out, he sort of relayed to me, I phone and he's like, I'm in a meeting. So he's doing like the stage whisper. And I, the relationship with my dad. And I'm like, so then turn your blank phone off. And he's like, yeah. And then it goes click. He just kind of, and so he relates this. So I wasn't living at home anymore. This is like long after I had moved out, but you go home for family supper or whatever, hanging out with the family. He's like, yeah, every time you call, he said, I'm now afraid of getting a phone call because of you. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, because I don't know how to answer it quick enough to, and I'm afraid to turn it off in case there's an emergency. I'm like, dude, you got to get a better phone. Because he just had one of those phones, one of the simple phones, flip phone, open it up, huge buttons on it, like thumb size buttons, no functions, but it answers calls. But it was just remarkable. Even in that simplicity, he still didn't know how to mute it or turn down the ringer. So that's my total divergent, my dad's story there. But to that end, what I learned from it and what I always espouse to other individuals, I'm like, you gotta manage your tech. Like you have to make decisions about how it's going to behave, because these things tend to arrive completely alive now. Like you remember back in the day, you get your mobile phone, it wasn't turned on. It wasn't ready to use out of the box. You had to go through stages of waking it up. You had to go through stages of bringing it to life. There was not much there for you. I can only imagine right now, like my dad, give him an iPhone and what he would be confronted with, with a bar of a phone. Him probably being afraid to even put it anywhere because like, oh, I can't close it. There's no safety. Like, how do you keep it from getting damaged, right? So much about it. Huge divergence. But all I'm coming back to is you text me anytime. Your need to communicate does not dictate how I use my technology. So you want to reach out, do it. You want it 2 a.m. in the morning? That's all cool. I'm on night mode. So I'll get it in 6 when I wake up. But if you need to reach out, dude, you do it. Phone too.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Same goes for you. I turn my device off, but when I turn it on, I get whatever messages are there, or text or whatever. Two things. I was gonna say something in the middle of that, but it's something that's more on ramp, off ramp worthy. So no, I'm not doing it.
Oh, okay.
So I had to think twice. Number one. The second thing is when you were talking about your father using a cell phone, I was reflecting on my father using a cell phone. And here we have, the immigrant from the Middle East. I remember when he first got a cell phone, it was funny because he didn't really know what to do with it. I'm like, Dad, it's just like the phone in the house, because that's how rudimentary they were, right? Yep. But yeah, now I'm picturing my dad with an iPhone, and it brings a smile to my face because initially it would be, he'd probably toss it, right? Because it'd be so frustrating. But I have to say, to my father's credit, that this whole Uber thing and stuff, I think my dad would have invented that. Because at the the end stage of my dad's life. He was a taxi driver, and he was all about innovating the whole process of getting people to where they need to be. Like, I remember when he got his cell phone, people were calling it all the time. And I was like, Dad, what's going on here? Why is your cell phone, like, why are you so popular all of a sudden? And he's like, I give people my number, so if they need to go somewhere, they can call me. Like, my dad was doing Uber before Uber. You know what I'm saying? So I just imagine that had he got into it a little bit more, I'm sure he would have recruited me and my friends to like figure out how to make apps and stuff like that so that he could benefit from it. That's the type of guy he was, very innovative for his time. So it's funny, if you ask my wife, she'll tell you, oh yeah, when I realized what Uber was, I was like, my dad was doing that back in the day. He was all into that, all into tech too. He loved tech, kind of like I do, but he didn't get a chance to play with it as much as I get to. The other thing I wanted to say was,
I love that. I love that you threw down on that. I just want to throw that. I love that you threw down on that. This is the first time, because remember where we started with this, and I know you know this. It was that whole element of the humans that are dads, that are teachers, that have families, that we're going to kind of approach this not necessarily from, well, we will approach this from inside out the classroom, but also from outside in. But I think this is the first time that you and I have landed on a layer of our own heritage specifically. We went there a little bit when you told the story about the professor, but we never landed clearly sort of like, you know, our dads. Like that's I love it. I love that we were able both to throw down, you know, a dad story in this episode, because it's good. I like it. I like that we're able to kind of land there. I feel like that's a cool kind of evolution of this conversation, bringing a little bit few more of the family members in. I just wanted to highlight that. I dig it.
I didn't even think about it that way, but you're right. It's pretty cool to be able to, the dads talking about education are now talking a little bit about their dads. I don't know. It's kind of neat. Maybe one day our kids will have a podcast and they'll talk about their dads. One day, if you want a podcast, I think you'll just touch yourself on the wrist, because the computer will be built into us, and you just start talking, and somehow, some way, the human body, with the help of augmented reality, will just record itself and then push it out to the world. This is what I just imagine. Like, I'm trying to think, how is this going to look like in the future? And in the future, I don't see any human sitting in front of a machine with a microphone in front of. I just see it built into us. You just hit something on your wrist, or you even think it, okay, turn on, record, and you just start talking, and then boom, it's pushed out to everybody. I'm wacky that way. Like, I've talked about, let's go down the road of technology for a minute. I've talked about, I would love to, if somebody could give me an exoskeleton, okay? If somebody could design an exoskeleton for me to wear that would allow me to run with power and speed that I can't do in the body that I've been given, and my heart won't explode from the effort I'm putting into it, sign me up. I'm in. If sometimes it worries me that if somebody said to me, hey, we can put this thing in your body and it can do this and this, you want to try it? I think I would seriously consider that. And I would need somebody like my wife to talk me out of it. There's something about that combination of technology and the real human coming together and syncing in a way that could give us superpowers, you know, like the Iron Man suit. Man, if I had one of those, well, I'd never be home. I'd be out doing something, helping someone. I don't know. I'm into that kind of thing, but not really. Like, as we're sitting here talking about it, I can tell you, oh, I have an interest in that. But in reality, I'm not chasing it or anything like that. There's no, but that idea, I think, of thinking about the future and what's going to look like, I like to bring that into my classroom. I like to push my kids to think, well, I guess you could call it outside the box. I'm really sick and tired of that now. This whole thinking outside the box. I'm tired of listening to people say that. Just think of, just like be open to anything, I guess. What could come? And funny thing, I'm going to connect this to something that happened in my classroom this week. Last weekend, there were some tweets going back. And so last Friday was a PD day. In the morning, school sites talked about special education, and some people talked about assessment and evaluation. And then in the afternoon, it was an open afternoon for educators. It was like an afternoon that was connected to our association. And so our association allowed us to put on workshops and sign up for workshops, all teacher directed, all teacher created. And there was an innovation conference at the high school down the street that I would have probably gone to if I wasn't feeling strongly about what I did end up doing that afternoon. But at the conference, a former educator in our school board was the keynote speaker. And she was talking about innovation, because the whole conference is about innovation. And a couple of things were said, some tweets were made, kind of about, would your kids know what innovation is if you ask them? So I went back to school on Tuesday. I couldn't go on Monday because it was a snow day. Go back on Tuesday. And as you know, my students and I, we like to put together YouTube videos about our work at school and whatever is happening at school. And so I said to my kids, hey, I have a question for you. What is innovation? And some of them just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, what is innovation? And nobody could just stand up and give me a clear answer. So I said, perfect. Hold your responses. Let me set the camera up. And they're like, no camera. We don't know what we're talking about. I said, that's what I want to capture right now. I want to capture that you're sitting here working with a teacher who considers himself somewhat innovative. We have actually done some innovative stuff in this room, but you don't know what innovation is. So just hold on a second. So I grabbed my phone, put it on the tripod, hit record. What is innovation? And, some of them were like, I don't know. They were laughing at the camera because they were giddy, because they were nervous, because they didn't know. So we did that little bit, and I captured some of the, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then we sat down and we actually talked about it. So somebody Googled the definition, and then we started to play with the definition because I didn't like it. It was a stringent definition, like it was, from Webster's or something. I'm like, what is innovation? Like, I said, what did we just do in math around measurement? They're like, well, we use spheros to do time trials, to talk about perimeter. I'm like, well, did we kind of innovate there? Like, did we do something a little bit different around this idea of measurement that's always been around so that you could learn it and have some fun with it? And they're like, well, when you put it that way, yeah, we did. I said, well, okay, so if that's innovation, then when I ask you now, what is innovation? What might you say? And then we captured some of those thoughts and ideas. And then we pushed out a 3-minute video about innovation. And it was one of those moments where some of the kids really got it. Like, they were like, did you just capture our non-understanding of innovation and then connect it to our understanding with innovation and then push it out to the world to see? That's kind of innovative too, isn't it? I was like, yeah, kind of. Keep talking to me about it. I want to hear your thinking, right? Because just like in math, just like in social studies, just like in reading, I want to hear your thinking. Bring it to life. Just like the 3D printer, things are created that came from your brain that are now tangible. I want you to keep doing that. And so this week was an interesting week because they got to kind of go through this process, and I don't know why we've never kind of done that before. And I have no problem sharing this story with people, sharing that video with people. If you don't sit down and have a conversation, if you don't talk about something outright, you could miss a lot from that experience. My kids have been kind of innovating and dealing with innovation all year, but they didn't know what innovation was, even though they've been doing it. They didn't really have a true understanding. But once we kind of landed them, then they could take off again and have a better idea of where they were flying. You get what I'm saying? So
Totally. One of the interesting spaces that's so last 2 weeks ago, last week, the Ed Tech Summit. So when I was speaking to 2 weeks ago, part of so I'm going to kind of work backwards through that sort of podcast of the future thing that you're talking about. It was remarkable to me it was awesome to be able to present my thoughts. Hands down, that was cool. It was great for us to be able to podcast. Like there was a lot of pieces there where I felt, so for me, for conferences, I have a couple different agendas. Sometimes there's people that I want to meet. Sometimes it's about being able to think in a different space. So I might have similar ideas, but I need to do it in a different space. And I love getting out of my school board to be able to do that. That's just kind of at the heart. You and I have talked about that at length, where we're saying the value of being able to connect digitally like this, because we can't get to it on a regular basis necessarily. So it has to be like this. We're not going to hang out for coffee every weekend. The third part is also, it's only when I'm in those spaces that I'm aware of the gaps in my thinking. So being in these spaces that I don't normally visit, I become aware of a lot of the assumptions I have, not only about my teaching, but about myself and relationships and my understanding of curriculum and sort of like that big picture. At the heart of it, that was just that's one of the primary drivers in chasing squirrels as well. It's just trying to catch that thing that you don't even know if you can or you should, but there's value to the pursuit. So when you started talking about the podcast of the future, it brought me to the EdTech Summit, and the way that I framed that conversation for my colleagues was that you already have the tools in front of you. You don't have to go far in order to start doing audio capture. And for some of them, that was a profound future statement. So I showed them 3 different tools that in a lot of ways generate questioning techniques, and then rolled into how do you capture those conversations, methods to capture it. And like you said, you're turning on the camera in order to capture process. And that's a little bit what I did that was one of the activities I took one of the groups through, where I said, we're going to do a podcast right here. And just before that, I asked, what's your sense of risk? What's your sense of risk as far as, willingness to take a risk for yourself, willingness to take a risk on behalf of your students? Where do you sort of feel more comfortable? And a lot of the teachers in the room, well, colleagues, not everyone was specifically a teacher, they're far more comfortable to promote risk with their students and take a risk on behalf of their students, as opposed to take a risk that's specifically for themselves, whether that's to improve. I kind of took that as a life statement maybe, but maybe in that idea of developing yourself personally, professionally, just taking a risk for you. Case in point, let's say you and I, like, this is entirely a risk for us. We're sort of producing a weekly conversation that we're just kind of putting out there. Let's see what happens. There are individuals in that room, because I labeled it a beginner's thing. They're like, I would never be able to do that. And my response on one hand is, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that you could. It's a weird little tension. So what I did in the group, I took out my mobile phone and I said, we're going to do a podcast right now. Will Gurley was there, which was awesome, because it's always good to have someone in there that is going to just kind of roll with you. So I said, Will, I need you to throw down an intro song. He's like, what do you mean? I said, any song at all. Okay. And I had handed out this has come out of my program. I think I may have showed it to you. I wrote a post on it, but we have in our in-house, last year we did a provocation deck. And all we did is we took all the buzzwords that we felt we had encountered in the year, and we put them on playing cards. And we have 3 decks. I got them here somewhere. 3 decks just with key words. And if I were to probably throw up any one of them to you, you'd be like, yeah, I could totally see how that would, prompt conversation. So I'd already handed these out at the beginning of the the session and not told anybody what it's for. I said, okay, so we're going to talk about taking risk on the possible positive outcome for taking a risk with a podcast or capturing audio. Will, let's start with, and I had to give him a cue. So he started singing a version of Despacito, which was awesome. And he started singing, and I just kind of said up and then down. And then I just started going around the room, popcorning. So it was all done in real time. And what was fascinating about that is that for some individuals sitting there, they probably felt like this is the future, because I'm modeling a class activity. You can do a podcast in real time, store it on Google Drive. I said, you can stream it if you want. But if you've never done it before, here's a whole class activity that can be done like this. We're going to do it in real time. That idea of innovation happening in front of you, I think that's to speak of innovation, depending on your skill set, you might not necessarily get the legs on it that you're looking for, but it's the process of speaking about it. But also, I think, in that looking at what's in front of you to use. So often innovation for me, where I find it problematic is when we start labeling it as future thinking. Innovation for me is now thinking. Look at exactly what's in front of you. Deal with that first. If you need to add an extra layer to it, do it. But don't start with that idea that one idea is going to the moonshot buzzword. This is where I find it problematic to suggest that moonshots are the things that get us to innovation. For me, innovation is what's in front of you. Let's get a high density, collaborative, willing, brave group of people to kind of play with the toys that are there, and you watch what happens. Like, seriously, kids don't build buildings out of Lego because they know what a building looks like. Kids build buildings out of Lego because it's in front of them and they're opportunistic. And then all of a sudden they built a building. And that was sort of like when you talk about innovation with your kids, that's what I love, because you go in, it's like, you know what? I'm going to capture the sandbox here. And that in itself is so valuable. I think kudos to you for doing that and supporting the kids to do it. We need that exact same model happening at teacher level. There's my rant. I'm going to take a sip out of my Lego. I have a Lego cup this morning. Nice.
Well, listen, we have to be aware of the context, right? So I'm working with these kids. It's we have like 2.5 more months to go. It's something that we've been doing. So like, it's not nothing I did with them was new, right? Like everything I did was what I like to think I normally do in terms of, let's explore something that you tell me you don't know anything about, which I disagree with. Let's be okay with not understanding something, because it's, I tell them all the time, if you knew everything I was going to talk to you about and everything we were going to do, then what would be the point of being here? You wouldn't be here. So think about that for a minute, let that sink in, and then let it go so that you can actually be here and we can do what we need to do. There's been a lot of talk like that this year in my classroom about you're supposed to feel uncomfortable when you're learning. It means that you don't know something that you're about to learn it. Like, be open to that. Let those feelings come. Some of these students in my class still do not accept that. And I don't know what to do about that. I think part of that is personality. Part of that is there's trust. There, issues, if you want to use that word. It's not going the way it has with other groups. I've had other groups that have been very open to just being open and letting learning come right to them. This group's not like that for the most part, if I'm allowed to generalize about them. But they trust me enough to be able to deal with the camera. And again, the camera has come from them. It was them that told me that they wanted to be YouTubers, right? So it's like I'm really glad you let me talk about this, because when you start to break it down, you see that the breakdown equals the things that are supposed to be happening in school, in my opinion, right? Like trying new things, understanding that you're not going to feel good all the time when you're in a learning situation, understanding that you will be frustrated and you're not going to get things the first try. And also being open to the fact that if you just take baby steps and you're willing to try, then in the end you can have a product that can really show people and yourself that there's learning happening and that you've accomplished something, right? And so I think that I like what you said about the Lego. You give kids anything and you let them have some time. They don't set out to create something amazing. Like you said, most of them don't. Most of them just have an opportunity to work with something. And the next thing you know, they can make connections to it, right? They can create things, build things, whatever. And that's kind of been my philosophy for the past, I don't know how many years. Give kids the thing, give them some time to experiment, to play, whatever you want to call that, some non-structured time, if they're okay with that, and then bring it back so that they have some kind of understanding in two places that can then be melded together. I have found that when you don't let students have time to manipulate something or to play with it, it's much harder for them to be able to make connections. So when we got the Spheros, you know, my kids know me well. They're like, so how much time are you going to give us to just mess around? Right? Because they really want to take advantage of the play time, the experiment time. And I'm like, I'll give you a couple of periods. You know, I'll give you a couple of periods to just play. But you have to know that I'm going to be talking to you about that, and I'm gonna require you to provide me with some like logical information about what you've done, what you're doing, what you've learned. So it is play, but we're not outside of recess. We're in the classroom, and I'm responsible for certain things in here. And if somebody walks in and says, "What are you doing?" you have to be able to talk to that human being and explain what you're doing in a way that connects to the reason why you're at school. And it was awesome. Just like everything else that we do together. It was great in the moment. It's great when they're doing their thing. So anyway, I'm glad that I had a minute or two to decode that whole process, because that's my style. Other people have different styles, but we all want to get to the same place. We want to get to a place where kids are able to do things and to grow and to be able to sustain that growth on their own. And so I know when I talk to the kids about how I see the future and what I envision, they do pay close attention, because I think some of them think, wow, this guy's nuts with his ideas. And the other ones think, well, if he can think that way, then I've got a lot of ideas in my mind that I've never expressed because I didn't think that anybody wanted to hear them, or people would think they were silly. And I want to end on a note like this little ramble with something that happened to me when I was a kid, when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I had a sleepover. I was at my cousin's house sleeping over. And whenever I slept over at my cousin's house, we would do this thing. Well, we do a couple of things. First of all, we'd always make sure we were awake at midnight to go downstairs and to get a midnight snack. And, you know, it got harder as we got older because everybody was staying up past midnight. So we were like, it had to turn into like the 3 o'clock snack, but we never made it because we were always exhausted. So that was the first thing. But the other thing we did was right before we would actually try to sleep, we would be face down in our pillows, and we'd have our head in our pillow, and we would talk about how we see our lives when we're adults. I did this when I was a kid. It was my cousin's idea, not mine, so I can't take credit. And I remember my cousin and I talking about a day and time in the future where people would be able to communicate with each other just the way you and I are doing right now. That I would be able to see you on a screen. You'd be able to see, we called it a TV. I would see you on the TV, you would see me on the TV, and we would actually be able to talk without using a telephone. And so then when I first heard of like video conferencing, teleconferencing, I was like, I remember that was the first moment where I thought, that was my cousin's idea. Now, I know it wasn't my cousin's idea, and I'm sure he picked it up from somewhere along the way. But I remember, to me at that time, thinking that would be amazing. And I'm actually doing it right now, talking to you without using a telephone. And I've got a screen in front of me. I called it a TV when I was a kid because when I was a kid, that's what the screens were. They were televisions. But you know, I've told every single class I've taught, I've told that story to my students to just show them how far we come. So if I imagine that one day I can just be walking down the street and say, audio, video, record now, and then just start talking, knowing that somehow my existence is recording what I'm seeing, what I'm saying, to be used for something. I don't think that's far off. I think it's doable. I think it's crazy that someone would put something into you to make that happen. But I believe that, like, if you can just open your eyes and express these ideas that sound crazy to some, to others it brings hope. If we're all moving in that direction, of course we're gonna get something. That's a moonshot, and from that moonshot, something can come of that.
Yeah, I was reading an article this morning just about. It was commenting on the kind of like the bad quality of science fiction that's out right now. That it's kind of focusing on the gloss and polish, and not enough on basically. The comment is exactly where you and I are anchored right now, saying that science fiction good science fiction provokes an interest in your present. It needs to be provocative to make you look at your present surroundings. And any of the, post-apocalyptic or dystopian society type visions of the future, I would think that part of what makes them compelling is it makes you say, whoa, I better do some work to make sure that never happens, right? It's got to be that kind of commentary just outside of your periphery that someone is kind of like it's the kids in the almanac that the good, somehow these kids have their finger on the pulse of the natural world and saying, yeah, next Friday, don't schedule that test because there's a snow day coming. And I think that's the nature of also like good science fiction, that it's almost like someone's tapped into source code and they're giving you just a little bit of a prompt, like, take care of what's in front of you right now, because this is the possibility as I see it. Now, I like how you framed it as well, saying giving hope, because I think in sort of pointing out the future possibility, the hope is that you got time to fix this, as opposed to like, that's it. Give up now, right? White flag. You're done. And they sort of bring about this idea that with, the type of stories that are generating that are just only written that only draw conclusions from what's already been made are not innovative. Yet the challenge is then working with the stuff in front of you. Like the idea, I started just kind of sketching out here, that idea of the podcast of the future. It's interesting because you even put it out. I would like to be able to just hit record. Well, the pieces that would make that possible exist right now. They actually are right there right now. If you want to, you can in the simplest form, walk down the street. You can have your earbud in and just take a voice memo. You can put that out into the world right away. There are other tools that are more refined, as in, what would that look like to sort of be in a space where you could be recording like that and someone could instantly pick up on your feed? So they wouldn't have to necessarily, like, directly from you. It doesn't have to go to a place first to stream, but someone could just kind of open up their, whatever that antenna is, and right away realize, well, there's 15 people in this park that are having thoughts. Probably more, and you tap into their feed and share, instant share. And it's funny, one of the things that the whole podcast conversation at the EdTech, someone has actually said in conversation with me about podcasting, wait, so it's like portable conversation? And that's just, it's genuine statement. So that's like portable conversation, because my mind automatically goes, well, conversation's already portable. Like, there's no load on it. You have a conversation, it's there in the air, and then you walk away and it's gone. You don't need a lot to generate it. From their point of view, though, it's that idea of portability, as in it's curated. So how do you go back to it afterwards? That's their concept of portability, that they can, it's not that it's easy to carry while it's there. It's easy to take away once it's done. But it's just it's an interesting kind of way to look at it, because the truth of it is, like, when I think in some ways of future of podcast, where you brought me is, do you think podcasting right now is making real-time conversations better? because that would be a true innovative mode, is that if podcasting now as a captured audio was making human to human conversation better. That was my thought. Kind of weird all the way around, but that's where you got me sparking up.
Weird. That's crazy. Weird, crazy. Can I share one more weird story, and then you can say whatever you want and we can shut down? Okay. So 4 years ago, I met up with one of my mentors at a coffee shop, and I said, I have this idea, and I want to get it out. It's there, and it's not really organized, but I want to get it out. So he's like, okay, go for it. So I told him about the 3D printing idea. I had already, my students and I, like over 2-year span, had built some capacity around using technology with our learning. And then one of my students pushed my thinking, pushed me in a way to get me to start thinking that like this particular student was ready to move beyond the screen and to start creating things with her hands. So she's like, I've got this great idea. And then she kind of created a prototype using like technology, and I could see her prototype on a screen. And she's like, now I need to build this. But I don't want to build it because I don't believe I have what it takes to build this, but I want to build this. And this is what I see in my mind. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this kid is ready. This kid has an idea, has brought it as far as she feels comfortable bringing it. And now she wants to go the next step. And we're talking a grade 2 student here, right? So we're talking 7 years old. And she's pushing me, who is like 30 something, to the next level. So I'm like, okay, 3D printing, because I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know too much about it. But I was willing to go down that road and explore. So I'm sitting with my mentor. We're in a coffee shop. And he's a pretty open dude, very modern type of guy, older, like in his 50s, but like he sees where education was, where it is now, where it's going. So we're having a drink, and I'm like, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to get a 3D printer, and I'm going to teach my kids how to take their ideas from here onto the screen and then in real life, so that they can actually hold their creation in their hand and bring that whole thing for full circle. And I remember he said to me, it's crazy. Nobody's going to fund this. Nobody's going to think this is going to happen. When I look back on that now, I think it was crazy for him to say it was crazy, because I've been there, I've done that, and like we're way down the road in terms of 3D printing and how common those machines have become in our lives. They're everywhere now, and I think that as time goes on, they'll become cheaper and they'll be in everybody's homes like computers are and cell phones and whatever. I tell my kids that now because it's such a fresh, crazy idea that has come to be so quickly. And so what I want to end with is that it was a 7-year-old who pushed me to my next level thinking. It was a mentor who told me it's not going to happen. And in the end, I had to go with my gut and do what I felt I needed to do to move on on my trajectory. And so when I talk to my kids now who see the printer in the room, who use the printer in the room, I tell them that was once a crazy idea not very long ago. And so when I say something that sounds crazy, or when you say something that sounds crazy, I think we should both enjoy the moment, because crazy, like it used to be 15 years ago, isn't the same anymore. It's different. That word has to be defined differently, because people are doing all kinds of things that were unimaginable. So when you see the unimaginable happen, why do you keep thinking that the unimaginable or the imaginable is not possible? It obviously is, because we've done it over and over and over again. So I kind of want to end on that circular bit, because today, the crazier the idea, the more excited I get about it, and the more excited I get about the process of making it happen. I find that that's my fuel these days. That's what has me going. That's what has me kind of continuing on in my work as an educator. It's the things we can imagine and then saying to people, now make it happen. Because in my short life, I've had a few crazy ideas that have actually come to be. And you're, 10. So you're starting way earlier than I ever did with your crazy ideas. And let's work on making them happen.
I like that. I like that. That's a good off ramp, eh? That's a good off ramp. I feel like you've just, yeah, that's just, and then it's sort of like, okay, you have those you ever, you know what, the good on off ramps that I find from you, it's where you have that moment where you kind of leave the parking lot at the same time as another person, and some way, somehow, as you're both you kind of get side by side, and it could be any parking lot, but just think in a moment where you're side by side in the car, and I'm going to use the car because I think it's somehow different. You're in the car and you both come to that space where it's the fork in the road, and as you each take your own separate way, you just happen to look over, and another person's like giving you the like good to see you, see you later, and you turn, and it just feels so natural, and it feels like that's exactly how that moment was supposed to play out. That's a good off ramp, because you kind of feel like you're going to go off on your journey and you're kind of going in opposite directions with purpose. And it's a good see you later moment. Plus that serendipity of just looking over your shoulder as the other person just happens to be looking over their shoulder, and you make eye contact. You're like, have a good day. That was cool. That was a good off ramp.
It reminds me of when we met up in Newmarket and you were leaving the arena. I don't know, you probably were not aware. We were both walking out together like this. You were going out the outdoor, and I was hanging a left to go to visit my head coach and to sign in for the game. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, okay, peace out, Clough. And you're like, see you, buddy. And you did the salute, and we just kind of went. It was the same kind of thing.
It's a good off ramp. It's a good off ramp, right?
So I guess, oh, sorry.
No, man. Go for it.
I was just going to say, okay, we're going to turn it off now, and we're going to go on our off ramp. And I never did capture the, see, this is where apparently I blogged about the last 2 episodes, but remember when I was pointing to the hat and it was going to be the
screen cap.
Like the thumbnail.
Yeah.
I never did that. Maybe this time.
There you go. That's it.
Maybe this time. Okay.
Spring training, baby.
Have a good week.
You too, buddy.
And hopefully we'll be on again next weekend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take care of yourself.
You too. See ya.